That's the story we were told. 19 kamikaze Muslim hijackers hated our freedom so much that they took over 4 commercial airliners. They flew them around the northeastern United States. They crashed one into each twin tower. And one into the Pentagon.
Smoke rising up out of what looked like a small pit.
One went down in a Pennsylvania field after a struggle with heroic passengers.
Huge explosion.
Super hot fires raged inside the towers, melting the steel supports, eventually causing them to collapse under their own weight.
Almost like a mushroom cloud explosion. And I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower.
And all of it was masterminded by a guy hiding in a cave in Afghanistan. The events of 9/11 were bizarre and unprecedented. Yet the government wasted no time telling us what happened,
The heat was so intense that the steel melted.
who did it,
Reputed Arab terrorist Osama bin Laden.
and what our response was going to be.
They were acts of war.
Before and since 9/11, no steel-framed skyscrapers have ever completely collapsed from fire. On September 13th, just 48 hours after the event, Northwestern University structural engineer Zdenek Bazant published his simple analysis. Simple. Bazant imagined the upper block of the tower powering down through the entire undamaged lower part of the tower in what became nicknamed the pile driver theory. That same day, September 13th, 2001, structural engineer Chris Wise also made it simple. He informed us that the fire reached 800 degrees Celsius, which melted the steel supports. The Twin Towers were among the largest and strongest structures ever built. They were a tube within a tube, 240 steel box columns around the perimeter, and a central core structure of 47 massive and cross-braced steel columns. Could plane crashes and fires really cause what we saw?
It was the heat. The flames there burned too long and too hot, rising above 1,500 degrees. It began to melt the steel.
The American people were in shock. Most accepted the simple explanations unquestioningly, but not everyone. On September 11th, explosives expert Van Romero said he thought explosives were planted in the towers. Curiously, a week later, Romero flip-flopped and said that fire did it. But could fire really do this?
It's hard to put it into words.
To some people, it looked an awful lot like a mushroom cloud. On October 21st, 2001, Jay McMichael posted, "Muslims suspend the laws of physics." I tried to be patriotic. I tried to believe, he says. McMichael points out that a jet fuel fire cannot possibly melt steel. A few weeks later, speaking at the UN, President Bush called for intolerance.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
Nevertheless, videos and websites claiming a 9/11 government conspiracy began to flourish. There were questions, painful questions, about the missing air defenses, demolitions, Building 7, multiple war games, and the airplane passenger lists. A few days after 9/11, CNN published the passenger lists from all 4 of the hijacked flights. No names of any of the 19 hijackers were on there. Larry Silverstein took out a 99-year lease on the Twin Towers just 6 weeks before 9/11, after it had been owned by the Port Authority for over 30 years. Speaking about Building 7 in a PBS documentary, Silverstein said,
I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
A put option is a financial instrument that goes up in value when the stock value goes down. Just a few days before 9/11, the volume of put options placed on United and American Airlines spiked to more than 30 times normal. And where was America's mighty air defense? When any commercial aircraft is off course or does not respond to air traffic control, it is standard procedure to intercept with scrambled Air Force fighter jets. F-16s can be airborne in 2 minutes. The 9/11 planes were flying all over the Northeast for an hour and a half. Was it just a coincidence that a number of military war games were taking place on 9/11, including simulated hijackings, planes crashing into buildings, and fake blips injected into radar screens? NORAD and the FAA were confused. Was it just a coincidence that a bioterror exercise called Tripod 2 was scheduled for the day after 9/11 on the pier right next to the World Trade Center, and that FEMA agents had already arrived the night before 9/11?
To be honest with you, we arrived on late Monday night and went into action on Tuesday morning.
Was it just a coincidence that on the day before 9/11, the Pentagon announced that it had misplaced
$2.3 trillion?
Was it just a coincidence that Flight 77 struck the Pentagon in an area that had recently had the outer walls renovated and that contained financial records, and not in the area where the top brass had their offices? Flight 77 allegedly made a death-defying spiral dive maneuver, then flew in at ground level, knocking over multiple light poles, yet somehow pilot Hani Hanjour maintained control despite the fact that he couldn't even fly a Cessna, and managed to destroy the aircraft so completely that not a single serial number part was ever recovered? Where are the engines? Where are the seats? Where's the luggage? Where are the passengers? Popular Mechanics magazine published an article and later a book promoting the official story.
Conspiracy theorists want to know why it wasn't the width of the full wingspan of the plane, and actually just the simple reason was that the wings came off.
I think what they expect is that if an airplane hits a building, it kind of punches a cartoon-like hole in the building in the exact shape of the wings. The wings did not fully penetrate the facade. In fact, the wings had already been partially sheared off by the time the plane even hit the building.
Perhaps people expected a cartoon cutout at the Pentagon because earlier they'd been shown cartoon cutouts at the Twin Towers. And what about World Trade Center Building 7? A 47-story skyscraper that dropped straight down into its footprint at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11. It certainly wasn't hit by any airplane. And why was most of the steel from Ground Zero hurriedly shipped off to China before it could be studied?
We were able to move 120 dump trucks out of the city last night, which will give you a sense of the work that was done overnight.
Shit! Oh, shit!
A number of early researchers noticed the sheer speed of the tower destruction. An object dropped from the top of the towers would take 9.2 seconds to freefall to the ground, ignoring air resistance. With air resistance, freefall time could go above 12 seconds. Measuring the downward acceleration of Building 7, it is shown that the mass literally went into freefall, meaning the structure offered no resistance whatsoever. This is irrefutable proof of controlled demolition.
It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, pick your word.
The 9/11 Blimp website offered this graphic, asking which would hit the ground first. The top part of any skyscraper is the lightest and weakest part. They get progressively stronger and more massive as they go down. A growing number of people could not believe this was a gravity-driven collapse. In May 2002, FEMA released the first official government study on 9/11. The findings were packaged for mass media in the PBS Nova program, Why the Towers Fell.
As the steel began to soften and melt, the interior core columns began to give. Then you had this sequential failure that took place where it all pancaked one after the other.
If the floors pancaked, wouldn't the core structures be left standing? Quarter-mile-high monoliths of steel and concrete allegedly collapsed and fell down into a pile. This is what was actually left of the Twin Towers. Aman Zafar took this series of still photos from across the Hudson River. The building appears to systematically disintegrate into an expanding cloud of dust, a dust tsunami. Posting on his site 9/11 Research, mathematician and software engineer Jim Hoffman studied the expansion of the dust cloud. he discovered this phenomenon required at least 10 times more energy than would be available from the falling mass of the tower. That's not even counting the energy needed to break the building apart and create all the dust.
Oh my God, oh my God.
Only powerful explosives could explain the presence of so much energy. Public pressure forced a new government investigation. The 9/11 Commission issued its report in August 2004, but they ignored all of the troubling questions raised by the Truth Movement. Instead, they assumed the official story about the 19 hijackers and framed public debate around intelligence failures. Did the Bush administration receive warnings that Al-Qaeda was going to strike? How specific were the threats? How can security be strengthened in the future? The 9/11 Commission did offer one casual little footnote about the frailty of the Twin Towers. Does this look like a hollow steel shaft? The 9/11 Commission did not even mention Building 7. But we did get some very interesting testimony from Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta.
During the time that the airplane coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?
What were those orders? To shoot the plane down or to not shoot it down? In 2005, Jim Fetzer, Professor Emeritus from the University of Minnesota and noted JFK assassination researcher, teamed up with BYU nuclear physicist Stephen Jones to create the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. The academic affiliations were adding much-needed visibility to the 9/11 Truth movement. Fetzer scored 3 appearances on Fox News.
Joining us now, the co-chairman of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, James Fetzer.
No, you're confused, and I hope that Fox usually does a better job on their research than this.
All right, so
I created an organization of faculty and scholars to study 9/11.
All right, I want to be clear on this.
We discovered that practically everything the government has told us about it is false.
Yeah, I want to get into
including physicists, mechanical engineers, pilots, aeronautical engineers.
Sure.
We've discovered that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition.
Do the orders still stand?
The order had to be to not shoot down the plane that was approaching the Pentagon. After all, the order should have been to shoot it down. Shooting it down would be the obvious thing to do when you consider that you're going to lose the passengers in the plane if you shoot it down, but if you don't, you're going to use the passengers in the plane and also, of course, all the personnel and property at the target.
The plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. The plane is 10 miles out. Until the order still stands. Till the order still stands.
Do the order still stand? 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 The order still stand? The order still stand? Yes, the Vice President turned and flipped his neck around and said,
Hell yes! Have you heard anything to the contrary? Oh, I'm a one dick with a joystick on the military. I will guide every plane where it needs to go. Oh, I guess you didn't get the memo. You didn't get the memo. No, 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 no. The South Tower came down. The North Tower came down. The number 7 came down. Isn't that strange? Because there was no plane. So it's hard to explain. I miss the chain. Say miss the chain. Yeah, miss the chain. Do the order still stand?
do the order still stand?
Hell yes! Have you heard anything to the contrary? I got a big dick and a joystick on the military. I will draw every plane where it needs to go. Those twin towers were dust tsunami. Did you hear about Rudy Giuliani? Someone warned him they was gonna blow, but I bet you didn't get the memo. You didn't get the memo. No, 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 no.
That's the statement of a musician.
I think the very kindest thing that we can say about George W. Bush and all the people in the U.S. government that have been involved in this massive cover-up, the very kindest thing we can say is that they were aware of the impending attacks and let them happen.
Bob Bowman is a nuclear scientist and a former head of the Star Wars program. Bowman was voicing a theory that became known as LIHOP, let it happen on purpose. 2005 also saw the release of a video that became the first internet blockbuster.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back.
Loose Change, written and directed by 22-year-old Dylan Avery. Loose Change implied what a lot of people were coming to believe, that the government didn't just allow 9/11, but that it orchestrated it, made it happen on purpose, or MIHOP. But why would the U.S. government do such a thing?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
In September of 2000, 1 year before 9/11, a think tank called the Project for a New American Century, consisting of future Bush administration officials Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Scooter Libby, Paul Wolfowitz, and media icon Bill Kristol, released a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses. They envisioned the expansion of U.S. military dominance on land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. They envisioned multiple simultaneous large-scale wars. But they complained that the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Claremont College theologian and author David Ray Griffin.
The cumulative argument. You don't just focus on one thing and say everything hinges on this. You show that no matter where you begin with the official story, there are huge holes in it, contradictions of facts. No part of the official story stands up. That is very important to realize.
Griffin's reputation inspired others. Former Bush administration senior economist Morgan Reynolds.
In 2004, I eagerly awaited David Ray Griffin's The New Pearl Harbor. Wow, he's put a lot of this together, made a powerful case that the official story cannot be true.
In June 2005, Dr. Reynolds published an article presenting strong evidence for explosive demolitions at the World Trade Center. Along with dozens of other academics, Griffin and Reynolds became members of the Scholars for 9/11 Truth, as did a PhD mechanical engineer at Clemson University, Judy Wood.
And if no one else is stepping forward, we have no hope. So we need to do what we can do.
In September 2005, the U.S. government's National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, released their final study of the Twin Towers. The 10,000-page report contained very sophisticated computer models of the airplanes and the fires, but no effort was made to model or study the actual destruction. They dismissed it with 3 words. We went to McMaster University and spoke with chemical and nuclear engineer Frank Greening. Greening has created a mathematical model attempting to show that a gravity-driven collapse was possible.
They stop at that global collapse ensued famous mantra. They just say global collapse ensued, and then they walk away. It's like, it started collapsing, we can go home now. I kind of this takes over where NIST stops.
Greening and co-author Besant are continuing the original piledriver theory.
Upper block drops one floor, 3.7 meters, hits the floor below, somehow manages to break the support structures of that floor. That floor now is therefore added to the block. It now hits the next floor, so on down. So the mass of the upper block actually grows, and it just chews away at the building.
This is what Dr. Greening is imagining. A strong upper block pile driving down through the tower. But this is not what we see. What we see is the top part of the building disintegrates before the undamaged lower part moves an inch. Here's a different view. Watch the corner. So much for Greening's piledriver. As the towers were being destroyed, large ejections of debris were observed far below the main front. Loose change claimed they were explosive charges going off. NIST and Popular Mechanics tried to explain it away with a piston analogy.
When the top of that building comes down, all that air has to come out, and where it comes out the windows. It blows out the windows.
For a piston to work compressing air, it has to be sealed. I asked Dr. Greening how collapsing towers could be sealed.
There were elevator shafts and stairwells. The air could be pushed down those. In a sense, the building itself is self-sealing, so some of it would be pushed out of that particular floor, out of the windows.
This makes no sense. We've already seen that the piston disintegrates before it pushes down on anything. But imagine for a moment that floors are intact and sealed and pushing air down. They cannot fall any faster than free fall. The main collapse front has only had enough time to get down to this level, yet we are to believe that material 20 stories below has already been crushed? How can that possibly be? And there is another problem with the official collapse theory. Smoke from the fires was drifting up and off to the southeast because that's the way the breeze was blowing. As the buildings are destroyed, look what happens in this area.
Here's what I want to call your attention to is just look in this area right here, what happens to the smoke and how much it expands. Distance between where that building is and that smoke increases because the building's falling down away from that area.
Yeah.
And yet, for some strange reason, that smoke begins to really expand and get.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've seen this particular video, but that little puff there at the end is strange.
It's strange because expanding a smoke cloud into a mushroom shape against the wind requires tremendous heat energy. That's why we only see this kind of effect with powerful explosives. And there is another problem with believing in a gravity collapse: the floors. Each tower had 107 floors. Corrugated steel pans, an acre in size, were held up by steel trusses. filled with steel reinforced concrete. Everyone agrees that a gravity collapse does not have nearly enough energy to pulverize steel floor pans. Supposedly 107 floor assemblies fell down right here. Where are they? Imagining that a skyscraper or any object can crush itself into dust under its own weight is cartoon physics. The official story has to be that the floors all landed in the footprint of the building, because if too much of the mass goes outside the footprint, there's not enough left to push down, and any sort of collapse would just stop.
Roughly, let's say 20% of mass shedding could be tolerated.
This is Brent Blanchard, a demolition expert and senior editor of Implosion World. Blanchard supports the official story and wrote a paper attempting to debunk 9/11 demolition theories. But he admits that there was basically nothing left in the footprint. Most of the mass was somehow converted into very fine dust and spread all over Lower Manhattan. Oops, I guess Mr. Blanchard didn't get the memo. A few steel sections remained intact. This 100-ton section was thrown over 300 feet to the west, where it landed in the Winter Garden. Tiny human bone fragments were found on the roof of this building years later. And there was yet another problem with the official story.